Hey guys, welcome back to another Helix video. Today I wanted to talk about some advanced routing options in Helix. There are lots of different ways you can configure Helix, so I wanted to just kind of start with a blank canvas and go through different scenarios that you might run into. I've been doing a little bit lately with some multiple amps and multiple outputs, and I'll talk about multiple inputs as well. So I thought it would be a fun video to do because I do occasionally have people asking me about this. So if you get through this video and I haven't addressed a question you may have about this subject, feel free to put it in the comments below. I can either help you there or I can always do another video. So let's jump right in and we'll start talking about this. Okay, so we are here. We have a blank slate here, blank canvas, blank preset. First thing I'm going to do is talk about if you wanted to do a dual amp. Now I'm going to start simply and kind of build from there. So, if you've already done things like dual amp presets, just hang with me. We'll get into some more interesting stuff as we go. And if you're brand new to Helix, this is how you do a dual amp setup. Okay, so I'm going to start with amp and cab. We'll get to say like a amp plus an IR, down the line here with this video. But I wanted to just start rather simply DSP wise and keep the amp and cab combined. So now we have the Stone Age and the Supro. Grab one and pull it down. And now we have a dual amp setup. What you're seeing here is the split block and the merge block. So it's very simple. The signal comes in, splits, goes to both sides, merges back. All in a day's work. So right now this output is just going straight out to either your recording interface, your amp, your PA, whatever you're using. Let's say now we want to take and add some reverb to this. So we'll just do something simple like a room reverb. So now what is happening is the signal comes in, splits, goes through both amps, merges, and then both sides get the reverb. So let's say you just wanted reverb on one amp and not the other. There's two ways you can do this. One is, I'm just going to move this to make room. One is you can drag the reverb block to where it is sitting in a path for either one amp or the other. And that will accomplish that goal. It still merges back to the same signal. You're good to go there. The other way is to come here, actually come to the merge block rather, and pull down. So now you have two separate outputs. Paths comes here, splits, one goes to one goes to the other. The one cool thing about this, you can come over and, as you can see, these are hard pan left and right. So if you want a stereo sound, if you want to send, if you're playing live, you want one amp, one path to go to one side of the mixing desk and the other, or if you're doing the same in your recording interface, this is how to accomplish that. Or if you want it to just all go down the middle, just set it back to center. Okay, so there's that. Pretty straightforward stuff so far. But let's say we want to start adding some pre-effects. You want some drive and compression or anything of that nature. So let's come over here. You'll notice already we have a few things grayed out. We could not add another amp, cab, preamp, anything of that nature. It's going to take too much DSP. There's not enough horsepower left on this path. Let's come up to the distortion. Right now, the only thing not available is the Tone Sovereign. With our current setup, that one takes a little more DSP. Let's do something like a Tube Screamer. Same thing as a reverb. Right now, signal comes in, hits the Tube Screamer, then goes to both amps. If you only wanted the Tube Screamer on one amp and not the other, same thing as the reverb. It's just drag it where you want it. Right now, it would only hit the top amp. This would only hit the bottom amp. Anything in front of the split is going to hit both. Same as with the output, you could actually drag this down and do it this way to where you have your signals coming in both. It's still looking at all the inputs, but right now it is just going this way. And if you didn't want the reverb, if we did it this way, where it's two completely discrete paths, you've got drive and reverb on the top, you've got just straight amp sound and nothing else on the bottom. I find in more instances, I like to have the pre-effects going into both amps. Not always, but in a lot of instances, I would kind of think of this like a how would a pedal board, I would have my drive effects on the pedal board, and it's going to just go into the amps. But not that I've ever had the privilege of doing dual amp setups live, but I'm assuming if I did, that's how I would do it. Anyway, that doesn't matter. But you get the point. It works the same way as the reverb. I'm going to join these back. Now, looking at this, we can still add some stuff. We're losing some options on the drives. Let's say we wanted to add a Timmy. We come here and, well, what else can we do? Well, we're out of distortion horsepower. The only thing left in dynamics is a hard gate. Or we could do a simple EQ or a volume pedal. So we're pretty much out of power. So what could we do? Well, we could get rid of this reverb for one thing. So now we come back over and we have access to almost all the drives again, all the dynamics, all the EQs. And really the other thing, this really isn't about a mono stereo setup, but I will mention, if you're going to put effects before the amps, I recommend just using mono, save the DSP, excuse me, because there's no real advantage, in my mind anyway, there's no real advantage to having stereo before it hits the amp, because it's just going to get more or less summed down to mono. If I'm wrong, someone pointed out, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. So anyway, we could throw, modulation there. Let's see if we got any, yeah, we still have some room. So, if you wanted to do the Van Halen thing as an example, you can have a flanger and chorus, or a flanger and phaser up front. If you'd rather have them after the drives, just drag them around. Again, if you wanted one modulation on one amp and one on the other, you're all set. Just drag it around and you're good to go. So that, we actually have a little bit. Well, no, we're done. That's all the horsepower available if we do this particular type of setup on path 1. So now let's talk about if we wanted to do some post effects, how would we do that? Well, we have the entire path 2. Come over to the output block, send it to 2A, which is going to, as you can see, the arrows pointing now. We have the signal coming down. Now we can pretty much do what we want. Stereo reverb. Let's add another stereo reverb just because we can. Let's kind of see what we can add here, and if we run out of juice at any point. I am setting all these to stereo for a couple reasons. One, because I want to keep this path stereo, because we have, if everything's stereo, we do have a true stereo signal. The other reason is because I'm just trying to use as much horsepower as I can. Just seeing if I can max this out. This is obviously not a signal chain that you would ever use in a real world situation. Now, so far, we've been able to do everything, and we still have everything available. Now, there are some blocks that take up more DSP than others. For instance, the Cosmos Echo is a pretty intensive unit. And now if we come over here, we see we could not add a second Cosmos Echo. And the multi-tap's pretty strong. So now if we come over to this other block, we see, we have lost a lot of the other models because we've used up quite a bit of horsepower. But again, this isn't a signal chain that would be very realistic. I just wanted to show how much stuff you could throw at the second path while keeping all of your pre-effects and your amps on the top. So that was mainly the reason for that exercise. Now, let's say, as in the top example, you wanted reverb or particular effects on one amp and not the other. So currently, path 2A is feeding down here, and everything is going through this path. Well, what we would do, let's say we've got two different reverbs. Now, let's say we want both reverbs to go through the room reverb, but we only want the top amp to go through this Ganymede reverb. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in a placeholder, just a gain block. We can come back and change that later, but for the example, this will work. I'm going to pull this down. Now still, the signal is going to come in, split, and then merge, but both amps are still going through both sides. The way we do that, pull that down. So now we have two separate inputs. And I'm also going to move this merge block so that when it does merge, both paths will go through this room reverb. Now we still have the issue that everything's going to 2A. Fix that. We just pull that down, tell it to go to 2B. So now we have this path going to this one, and then we have 2B going to B. So you can do 2B or not to B. Anyway, so we've accomplished our goal of having this reverb only affect this amp and a room reverb affecting both. If we didn't want any reverb on path B, we can just pull that down. And now we have two more or less segregated paths at the top, two completely segregated paths at the bottom. So I hope that makes sense. Now you can come along and do whatever you want for the second path, and it won't affect the first path. Then, like I said, if you wanted to have this room reverb affect everything, just re-merge it. Let's say you wanted to have, just a compressor to kind of glue things together. Sorry, I just forced the habit of changing the setting there. There's a lot of different flexibility there. So that's another routing option. So let's say that instead of the amp and cab block, you wanted to do an amp with, say you wanted the cab block separately. Typically you would kind of think of, if you wanted to do impulse responses, that would be mostly the reason I can think of that you wouldn't want to do the amp and cab in this configuration. So let's take a look at that. And I don't know if I have any. Oh, I do have. Okay, I do have some of the ones. I don't use IRs. I bought some a while ago to test and just never really. I don't know. It's personal preference. Everyone's got their own opinion. So I learned the hard way that I don't need them. All right, I'm going to come back to the amp, and instead of amp and cab, I'm going to change this to amp. Same thing here. I'm going to come down to amp. Now, one thing you notice right away is all the amps are now available. The reason is because just the amp block is going to take up less horsepower, less DSP than the amp and cab block. Another benefit of that is now we're going to have a lot more DSP left for other effects. We can add more. If you want to add something else, another drive block. Let's see how much we still have left. Yeah, we're still pretty good. So as you can see, just moving the IR, if you wanted to do a cab and an IR, or let's see if we could do a dual cab. Yeah. So right now you could do a dual cab for the path, the top path, and then you could do an IR for the bottom path. Or if you did a single cab, you could do the cab blocks here. Even if you're not going to do IRs and let's say you're just going to do the Helix cabs, you still have the advantage of the fact that now you've freed up the cabinet DSP so that you can add more pre-effects up here, which is a good thing. Now, you are going to give up, obviously, you're going to give up some DSP here on the bottom, but actually not too bad, really. Let's see if there's anything that is off limits at this point. No, so we have two reverbs and a compressor. Not a lot going on, granted, but we still have some room to maneuver to add some post effects. So that's an option. Again, if you want to keep the paths discrete, just pull the split block down, or if you want to, you can drag that around wherever you want to merge it. So whatever effects you want to be kind of what I might call a finishing effect, where it's affecting the whole tone, just put it after the split block. So there you go. There's a way to handle almost any dual cabinet or dual amp type situation you might run into. So now, what if you wanted to run 3 amplifiers? Can you do that? Well, you obviously can't have 3 paths on the top. You can only have 2. So how would you go about accomplishing that? So let's back up a few steps, and we're going to go with an amp and a cab, and I'm going to try to remember how to do this. Okay, so we're back to just a straight line. We're sending it to 2A right now. So here's what we need to do. We need to take a more or less dry signal and send it to 2A and 2B. And then we need the top amp to just go straight out. So what we're going to do, I'm going to move this up here, drag these back to kind of give us a little bit of room. Again, let's do something simple like a gain block, pull it down, pull this down. Okay. So now we still have our pre-effects. So if you want, any of these effects are going to hit everything we're about to do. And then the gain block down here is just allowing us to form path to 1B. So now we come to the output block. It's going to go to 2A and B. It's important also that the inputs here are set to none. You don't want to have your guitar coming in this particular configuration. It's not going to work. It's not going to give us what we want. So, pre-effects, split block, amp 1 going straight out. We come down here, amp and cab, amp and cab. Let's see, there's almost nothing left. So now let's free up a little horsepower. That does it. Okay, so obviously if you do this, you're not going to have tons of horsepower left down here for lots of other effects. So right now what we have the path coming through, hits that amp, then splits, feeds into 2A and 2B. We have an amp on each path. This is joining back up if you wanted compression and reverb on both. If you just wanted on one, drag that down. And you can see we have 3 outputs now going straight out. Amp 1, amp 2, amp 3. Because different amps have different DSP requirements and DSP, effects on the processor, I'm sure you can run into situations where, say, there's certain amps that are just not going to work, or not going to. Yeah. I mean, I think there's some guides online about how much each. Sorry, mod's bugging me. How much each different amp uses DSP-wise. It might help you plan it out, but honestly, the quickest thing is just come in here, start throwing amps on, and see what you can get away with. So this is how you would set up a 3 amp setup if you if your heart ever so desired. So there's a couple of dual and triple amp ways to set things up. Let's talk about another scenario here. So let's say we have an amp and cab up here, and we are, like most guitar players, we are addicted to pedals. We want tons and tons of options. All right. We're going to throw a delay in here in front. So let's say we get to this point, and I don't want to say it couldn't happen because all my patches this ends up happening and I run out. So you got to this point and you go, I really wanted 4 drive blocks and maybe a second delay up here. Whatever. It doesn't matter what exactly. The point is, let's say you run out of blocks without dropping down to path 2. And let's say you run out of blocks on path 2. How would you be able to add more up here? It can be done. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull down this block here, all right? And I'm going to drag this over, and I'm going to have those split and merge right next to each other. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to a split AB. I'm going to send all the signal to B. So what that means is when the signal gets here, all of it is going down to B. None of it is going to go straight to the amp. So essentially what that's doing is elongating this path without having to worry about the signal going through unaffected by whatever is down here. You are basically at that point taking half the signal. So I like to come up and 3, 4, 5 dB boost. You'll just have to experiment with what works best. But if you're going to only use one path, I always recommend boosting it a little bit, so that you'll see kind of a more normalized level that you would if it was just going straight through. You won't have kind of a volume drop you have to make up somewhere else. So again, anyway, let's say we've got all our delay and mods there. We want to add another drive, kinky boost. We want to add we've already got a compressor. Turn all this off. Turn the noise gate on. There we go. Sorry, tired of hearing the buzzing. So you can see this just opens up a lot of possibilities. Another trick that I've talked about in past videos is if you want to dial your tone in, one quick way to do it is to throw a looper up here. So if the first thing your signal hits is the looper, then you can loop something, put your guitar down, then tweak until you get what you want. See, I would be out of space if I hadn't done this split here. So because I've added, I've got extra room, I can do things like put that looper up there. So again, I'm keeping all my pre-effects up here. I tend to like keeping my post-effects down here. So so that is if you feel like you're running out of room. Same thing applies. You can do this exact same trick down here. However you want to do it, wherever you want to put the break, you would just do the same thing. You would route it completely to one side, give a little boost to that side to keep your volume consistent, and you would have the same setup down here. So that way, in theory, I think you can use up to 32 blocks. I think my main patch uses about 25. So this can come in quite handy. One last example I can think of, and sometimes I will do stuff where I want to process the vocals or a microphone. If I want to do, guitars and vocals, what I can do is I can pull this down. I'm going to have this run to 2A, and then I'm going to set this input to the microphone. So now there's a delay. All right, so now I'm actually getting let me not do that for this video because I don't want to have extra input coming in since I'm using the microphone input on the Helix to record this video, but you could set it to whatever. So see, that gives you a whole nother path. I could have a reverb down here that is just something I want for a vocal. We have a room down here set the way I want it, a delay set the way I want it. Let's say I want to do a mic pre, maybe a little compression, whatever I want to do basically, and it would only affect this the whatever, if it's aux or microphone input, whatever. You get the idea. It's only going to affect, this basically becomes its own discrete path. So actually, let me give one more example here. Let's say, and this is something that a buddy of mine, Eric Broadbent, asked me about, and I'm hoping I can help him with this. But it was a way to have an input. He's using the Variax, to have the Variax magnetics, and then also be able to use a snapshot to control switching over to the Variax acoustic. So let's see if we can accomplish that. I haven't actually done this yet, so let's see what happens. I'm going to set input 1 to Variax magnetics. I'm going to set the input 2B to the Variax. I'm going to assign the Variax controller to a snapshot, and I'm going to set that to an acoustic. All right. So let's say we want to use an EQ to kind of shape the tone. But let's say the reverb and everything else is fine, and we don't want to waste blocks down here because we've got all kinds of stuff we want to be doing on the electric side. So what we can do is, whatever we want up here, we can add whatever effects. So let me test. I have my Variax, so let me test this out. So what I want to do is, let's say I want to keep the compressor and the reverb affecting the Variax input here. So the way we have it set, the Variax is going to come in on the acoustic, and it's going to basically still catch the compressor and the reverb, but nothing else is going to affect it. We can have whatever we want. So we're getting a separate input for the Variax acoustic, and it's only costing us 1 block, which is pretty handy actually. So how are we going to keep only the sound of the magnetics coming in when we only want the magnetics, and what about the Variax? So there's a couple ways, like everything in Helix, there's a more than one way to kind of accomplish it. The first thing that comes to mind is I'm just going to do in the mixer block here. A is going to be the one coming from the Variax mags. B is going to be coming from the Variax acoustic. So I'm going to assign these values to snapshots. All right, snapshot 1 is going to be Variax mags. Snapshot 2 is going to be Variax acoustic. I think I'll be able to spell Variax by now. All right, Variax mag, Variax acoustic. Okay, so on snapshot 1 for the Variax magnetic, now remember as I talked about, well, let me think about this for a second. Okay, I was getting ready to say I'd need to boost, but because these are coming from 2 separate inputs, I don't think I will. So basically, what I'm going to do is turn down level B, which is the Variax acoustic, all the way, and save that. And then for the Variax acoustic snapshot, I'm going to reverse that and turn down that one. So let's all find out together if this works. Let me turn off some of this weirdness, because really we just want to see what's going to happen routing wise. Don't really care what it sounds like at the moment. So all right, so we're hearing the Variax magnetic. Let's go to the acoustic. And we have a very out of tune guitar. Apologies for that. I didn't know if that's going to be playing for this video. I didn't even bother to tune it. Let me do this again. I didn't save it. I set it to acoustic, but I didn't save it for that snapshot. All right, and if you will indulge me, let me just get this thing in tune pretty quickly. But I think this is going to work. I think this is going to accomplish what we wanted to do. So this is very professional. You're getting to hear me tune my guitar. You don't get this in other YouTube videos. Look all you want. You're not going to find it. Only here. Only here. All right. Good enough for what we want to do. All right. We got acoustic. Everything's still turned on for the snapshot. You would, like, if you would just turn whatever off and save it. Just do it real quick just to show you it'll work. All right, so I'm going to save that like I want it that way. If you'll notice, I didn't turn these off for this Variax acoustic snapshot. Doesn't matter. Never going to hear it. So yeah, I'm going to tell Eric about this, and hopefully that'll solve his problem. But it presented a pretty interesting question when he asked me. So I was thinking about doing this kind of video anyway, so that added one more little wrinkle to it. All right, so there you go. There's some advanced routing tips and techniques for you. Let me know what you thought about it, if it was helpful. Again, if there's something I didn't cover that you're curious about, just throw it in the comments. I'll either answer it there or maybe make another video if it warrants it. So anyway, I'm not going to put this particular preset up on custom tone, not because I want to keep, or I mind it takes 2 minutes, but the whole point of these, a lot of my videos, and this one included, is I want to show you how to do it so you can go into Helix and do this yourself. And if you're like me, you really need to do it, put your hands on it to kind of get a hold of it. If you just pull up someone else's template, you may not get as far with Helix, being able to do what you want to do with Helix as you want to. You've seen what I've done. Grab an empty preset and have some fun with it. Please like, subscribe, comment, share, all that stuff you're supposed to say at the end of one of these videos. You already know what to do. Thanks for checking it out, and we'll see you next time.